Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 7 in our 8-video sequence on better decision making in the artificial intelligence era. This one's all about reducing susceptibility to biases and priming. Now, in the previous videos, we told you what biases tend to affect people in human life, and we also told you about priming. And so these are the reasons that people tend not to make great decisions. But can you do anything about it? Well, yes, you can. And here are some suggestions. Number 1 is unconscious bias training. Unconscious bias training has been undertaken in many locations across the world. And unconscious bias training is all about, firstly, explaining to people what biases are and make them more aware of their own biases. If you watched earlier videos in this sequence, including the one about biases, you may have heard me talking about Cronin's discovery of a thing called bias blind spot. And bias blind spot is really everybody else is biased, but I'm not. But when people become more conscious of their own biases, they actually become less biased. And that's a really important finding. If we understand that bias is perfectly natural, we focus on the potential to change, and we review practical examples of biases and how to avoid them, that can reduce bias. And we can overcome decision-making bias by adopting a more intellectually rigorous approach. So Hubel and colleagues discovered this in 2007. When you start to undertake a decision, you start out by saying, all right, let's agree our assumptions. What are we assuming? Let's agree our objectives. What are we hoping to achieve? And all of that can set us up more for success. We can look at decision-making bias training in field settings being where people are doing stuff on a day-to-day basis, and where people have been trained for de-bias training, in other words, the sorts of things that I was mentioning just before, things like becoming more conscious of your biases, things like becoming more cognitive, more systems two, as Kahneman would have put it, by concentrating on logical ways of dealing with things, mention our assumptions, mention our objectives, mention our measures for success. You can actually cause a 20% better outcome by undertaking that kind of an exercise. So you consciously look for negative evidence for what it is that you're considering doing. In the Catholic Church, they call this the devil's advocate. I'm told, I'm not a Catholic, but I'm told that if you've got a big decision to make in the College of Cardinals, you nominate somebody to be the devil's advocate. And the devil's advocate is often a Jesuit because that's supposed to be the intellectual vanguard of the Catholic Church. And that person's whole function in the discussion is to find fault in the logic of the people who are tending towards a certain decision. Now, that kind of specifically rigorous, thoughtful process can tend to much better results. One of the things that's been often mentioned is to conduct a pre-mortem. Now, what's a pre-mortem? This was discovered by Mitchell and colleagues, or proposed by Mitchell and colleagues in 1989. A pre-mortem is prospective hindsight. Human beings are very prey to hindsight bias. When something happens, people say, well, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. Well, they don't, actually, because they didn't know it before they endorsed whatever it is. But afterwards, it all seems so obvious. Well, what else could possibly have happened? Prospective hindsight and the pre-mortem is to say, listen, let's assume that we've failed. Let's now write down, discuss, and agree why we've failed. Now, this has not happened. We haven't failed yet. But it's been found that when people do this, they improve their outcome markedly. A pre-mortem actually works. And in some studies, it's been shown to be 30% effective in increasing the quality of decision making. So undertaking a pre-mortem does work.